Agradezco a la delegación de Sierra Leona por su declaración. Doy la palabra a la delegación de Estados Unidos.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Assistant Secretary General Yensha and Director Rajasingham, for your briefings. Mr. President, the United States government believes that today's meeting is emblematic of the counterproductive role that far too many governments on this Council and throughout the UN system have played on this issue. Meanwhile, the United States has been working tirelessly to free the hostages, end this war, and give civilians in Gaza a future free of Hamas. To do so, we need to place responsibility where it lies, with Hamas, and hold it and other Gaza terrorist organizations fully accountable. Today's meeting, like so many other recent actions, undermines those efforts. Israel has accepted 3 ceasefire proposals. Hamas consistently rejected them. It is not negotiating in good faith. We know this because we are in the room. The simple truth is that this war could end today if Hamas let the hostages and all of Gaza go free. Remarkably, instead of pressuring Hamas, members of this body have encouraged and rewarded its intransigence, actively prolonging the war by spreading lies about Israel, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and the United States, and by handing propaganda victories to terrorists. Mr. President, the most recent round of negotiations collapsed because Hamas drew encouragement from efforts to target Israel with libels and lies, the ill-conceived and performative two-state solution conference, and unilateral announcements regarding recognition of a Palestinian state. Just days ago, a Hamas official touted the wave of recognition announcements as a result of the atrocities of October 7th. This is a disgrace. The government of Israel did not make its decision to advance its military campaign in a vacuum, but after months of Hamas's intransigence. Hamas refuses to accept a ceasefire and continues to torture the hostages. The United States supports Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas's terrorism, and ultimately, Israel has a right to decide what is necessary for its security and what measures are appropriate to end the threat posed by Hamas and other similar groups. It is unfortunate that members have again taken advantage of today's meeting to accuse Israel of genocide. These accusations are politically motivated and categorically false. They are part of a deliberate, cynical propaganda campaign as Hamas attempts to win symbolic victories to compensate for total defeat in war. The United States refutes these allegations entirely. Israel has taken numerous measures to limit harm to civilians and to address humanitarian needs. The loss of civilian life in Gaza is tragic, but the responsibility for this rests with Hamas. Mr. President, the United States remains committed to 1, addressing humanitarian needs, 2, freeing the hostages, and 3, achieving peace. Too often, members of this Council spotlight only the first without acknowledging that the 3 issues are interrelated. No one wants to see innocent Gazans go hungry or thirsty. President Trump has addressed this, and he has said that the United States is going to be even more involved in these efforts. The United States has stepped up support for the secure delivery of humanitarian aid because the international community has failed to prevent Hamas from diverting it and using it to support terrorism and oppression. The United States continues to work tirelessly to feed hungry civilians in a way that denies Hamas the opportunity to benefit. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is critical to that effort as it continues to supply food directly into the hands of civilians. The GHF has distributed over 110 million meals, all while preventing Hamas looting. We call upon the UN to take advantage of the steps Israel has taken, including humanitarian pauses and designated corridors, as well as to work with the GHF, which has demonstrated it can securely deliver aid to civilians in Gaza. As Ambassador Huckabee has said, we support the GHF scaling up to 16 distribution sites to address critical needs. Mr. President, just last week, this Council heard evidence that Hamas continues to starve innocent people held hostage underground and on the verge of death. We cannot allow this to happen. We must hold Hamas accountable. The United States has made clear on multiple occasions that Hamas must be removed from power. As long as it remains, there will not be peace, not for Israel and not for the Gazans who deserve to begin a new chapter free of Hamas. The United States calls upon members of the Security Council and all countries to demand that Hamas immediately release all hostages, living and dead, and lay down its weapons and end this terrible conflict.
Mr. President, it is disappointing that the Panamanian presidency, ignoring the requests of the majority of members of the Security Council, including the Russian Federation, to convene an emergency meeting immediately, decided to hold it only today, despite the extremely dangerous developments in the occupied Palestinian territory, following the decision announced by the Israeli leadership to escalate hostilities in the Gaza Strip, which entails its occupation. We thank the UN Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Jenca and the head of the OCHA Geneva office, Ramesh Rajasingham, for their reports. The other day, the world learned the shocking news that the military political cabinet of ministers of Benjamin Netanyahu's government decided to send troops into Gaza and place the Strip under the total control of Israeli security forces in order, as the Israeli cabinet put it, to destroy Hamas. These actions by the Israeli leadership grossly violate international law. They demonstrate its open disregard both for the appeals of the international community and for the decisions of the UN Security Council. They deal an extremely serious blow to the prospects for a two-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We strongly condemn the Netanyahu government's intention to seize Gaza. In this context, we join the calls that have been voiced to West Jerusalem to abandon such extremely dangerous steps that undermine the already fragile prospects for a peaceful settlement of the Middle East conflict. We insist on Israel's strict compliance with the norms of international law and the well-known legal basis of the Middle East settlement, including the relevant resolutions of the UN Security Council and General Assembly. We remind that Israel's plans run counter to the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice of July 19, 2024. That opinion, among other things, unequivocally requires West Jerusalem to immediately end the occupation of Palestinian lands. Furthermore, the adoption of such a plan essentially means Israel's official and public acknowledgement of its goals to seize and occupy the enclave. As is known, after the disengagement from Gaza and the withdrawal of Israeli settlements from there in 2005, the Israeli leadership claimed that there was no occupation. This did not correspond to international legal interpretations given the continued Israeli control over the sector's perimeter, its airspace, and maritime waters. It turns out that Israel has all these years maintained and is now expanding an occupation regime over Gaza. This entails all the ensuing obligations to protect and provide for the civilian population, obligations that are mandatory and must not depend on the will of the occupying power. This is stipulated by the norms and principles of international humanitarian law, including the Fourth Geneva Convention. Mr. President, just a few days ago, here within the walls of the Council, we, at Israel's initiative, discussed in detail the situation regarding Israeli hostages in Gaza. The majority of Security Council members stated clearly and unequivocally that one of the main prerequisites for the release of all detained persons is an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. It was precisely thanks to the suspension of bloodshed and active diplomacy, rather than reckless intensification of hostilities, that over the past year and a half, more than 140 people were freed from the enclave. Unfortunately, West Jerusalem once again did not heed either the calls of the global majority, nor the reasonable voices within Israel, nor the relatives of the hostages themselves. Instead of engaging in negotiations, the Israeli authorities chose to pursue further escalation of violence. This has endangered the safety and lives of the Israeli hostages who, as we have seen, are already in unbearable conditions exacerbated by acute shortages of food and water in Gaza. It turns out that the Israeli foreign minister, who was among us on August 5th, and hypocritically shed crocodile tears in this chamber about the fate of the Israeli hostages, already knew that the Israeli cabinet would soon make such a decision. This decision has effectively destroyed the chances of bringing them back alive. Apparently, Mr. Saar was keen to prepare the ground for this and to promote a media picture of supposed solidarity and sympathy from Security Council members, only to then continue killing Palestinians. Such an attempt to manipulate the Security Council for domestic Israeli purposes is simply beyond comprehension. Just as incomprehensible is how the Jewish people who suffered the Holocaust during the Second World War can today place Palestinians in ghettos and seek their complete extermination. How quickly the lessons of history are forgotten. It is also obvious that the implementation of the Israeli leadership's plans for the complete cleansing of the enclave will only further worsen the humanitarian situation in Gaza. In fact, new mass force displacements have already been announced. This means more suffering for the civilian population, new casualties, and increased bloodshed. Given the way the conflict in Gaza is developing, we have no reason to believe the public statements of the Israeli authorities about their intentions to provide civilians outside the combat zones with everything they need. The methods Israel uses for food distribution are well known. They are inhumane, contrary to the norms of international humanitarian law, and lead only to the deaths of civilians. This, in particular, is vividly confirmed by the activities of the so-called Humanitarian Fund for Gaza. In places where food rations are distributed, more than 1,500 Palestinians have already been killed. We must not forget that proposed plans to move civilians during hostilities, as well as the use of starvation as a weapon, may be classified as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Moreover, such actions may fall under Article 2C of the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which Israel ratified in 1950. Mr. President, in conclusion, we would like to note that the day before yesterday, in an interview with an American television channel, Benjamin Netanyahu spoke of his intention to create in Gaza an alternative administration that would provide the Gazans, I quote, with a different future. Such an administration, according to Netanyahu, would not be Palestinian. This, in turn, contradicts numerous widely recognized international legal understandings of the Gaza Strip as an integral part of the future Palestinian state. For our part, we suggest reflecting on historical questions. What kind of future can people have under occupation? What can one say to the relatives of more than 60,000 dead who no longer have any future? How many more Palestinians must die before this inhuman massacre is stopped? And how long will those who consistently and fully support Israel and prevent the Security Council from acting continue to turn a blind eye to this lawlessness? For our part, we consistently and steadfastly advocate for a diplomatic settlement of the Palestinian question on the basis of the formula of two states for two peoples. In this arrangement, the legitimate security concerns of Israel will be met, as well as the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people for their own state. The alternative to this is the death of tens of thousands more innocent people, including the Israeli hostages who have been held captive for almost 2 years. The UN Security Council is simply obliged not to allow such a scenario. I hope that this will soon, finally, be understood in Washington. For now, however, as we understand it, despite the State Department's assurances of continuing, I quote, real and serious diplomatic efforts to end the suffering in Gaza, free the hostages, and achieve a lasting peace, the United States is simply washing its hands and giving West Jerusalem a carte blanche for complete freedom of action in Gaza. Thank you for your attention.